So, welcome back, if you are back, to another reading. And as I said yesterday, this is part two, and it's entitled The Funny Family. Something lost, something found. Uh, Before reading, I'd just like to explain that when I wrote this, I wrote it in the third person. And so I was saying things like Raymond and Stephen and they and there. Whereas now, as I'm reading it to you as well as for myself, I've I'm changing that into the first person, so I'm saying I and we and our. Um, there are so many instances of using this type of language in the book that I did think of going through and penciling in how I could change this or how I should change this, but I want to read this primarily for pleasure for me, and if anyone else is enjoying it as well, then that's all well and good. So therefore, I shall try to get through it with as fewer mistakes as possible. But if I make mistakes, please forgive me. So, within 2 years of first meeting, Stephen and I had married, sold the flat in London, and moved to the small Portuguese village of Potato. Within a year of moving into our new home, we had made friends, began to feel comfortable with the language, and despite some difficulties, our relationship was stronger and more secure than it had been when we had left England. Over time, our family had expanded, not in the sense of children, but in the guise of a motley crew of feathery and furry ones. Some of you listening to this may well remember the many feathery and furry ones that have been part of our lives, and of course, one of them still is. But I begin chapter 4, and this is Muffin. Over 4 years had passed between our departure from Ilfracombe and our return. Starting our journey at that time had been our two cats, but that was only the beginning of the funny family. Muffin and Biscuit had been Londoners, like Steve and I, but unlike us two, they had spent the first 7 years of their lives within the confining walls of a flat. They arrived in Portugal at a house that was bigger than the one they had left, and instead of traffic streaming past on the other side of the window to where they sat, there was now water flowing in a small channel that coursed its way to the fields below. All around their new home, mountains and tall trees provided welcome shade in summer, and the same cool shadows gave a good reason for the cats to stay inside, curled up on a sofa in winter. It surprised Stephen and me how, upon tasting the freedom of the open air, Muffin and Biscuit had accepted an outdoor lifestyle so readily and quite matter-of-factly. Whether crouched on rooftops high above olive trees, sitting under the tall pines, or finding cover beneath twisting grapevines. When during the 4th month of the cat's new life, 2 ducks joined the family, they paid them little attention, and Biscuit, always the more timid of the 2 sisters, ensured that she gave them a wide berth when returning home from her wanderings. The arrival of another 4-legged thing that lived in the house with them did, however, unsettle the balance of power. Melina started life smaller than the cats, but grew rapidly, and from the initial introductions, the puppy was far too inquisitive and boisterous for both Muffin and Biscuit. But the family absorbed the changes and things settled. As the February of our second year in Portugal had begun, Stephen noticed that Muffin had stopped being her usual gluttonous self. Within the space of a few days, she became weak and reluctant to leave the chair on which she slept, staying curled up in a tight ball. We had arrived in Portugal with a small financial cushion after the sale of the London flat had been finalised, the mortgage paid, loans and credit cards paid off, and essential purchases for the new home were made. But after more than a year, this cushion had lost much of its padding, and a point was reached when we could no longer pretend that our cat was going to heal without professional help. And so we made the decision to take Muffin to the vets. We'd been to a veterinary clinic the previous year when we had cared for a stray dog, but it was a good three-quarters of an hour's drive away, and so on this occasion we decided to ask friends and neighbours if they could recommend a vet closer to home. The vet that was recommended was about half the distance, but there the cat's two owners learnt. Oh, sorry, let me do that passage again. The vet that was recommended was about half the distance of where we had gone before. And once we were there, Stephen and I learnt that a feline's survival depends on its continued ability to hunt. And as such, evolution has endowed the species with the ability to mask serious illness until it is at an advanced stage. Our Muffin was diagnosed with a kidney infection, something that she'd probably picked up from contaminated water near our home. She was admitted for treatment, and on the second evening, Stephen and I visited Muffin at the clinic and were told that our furry family member was reacting positively to the treatment she was receiving, and that if we did not receive a telephone call from the vets within 24 hours, we should expect to take her home the following day. Muffin's return home was not, unfortunately, the one we had been expecting when we set off for the vets that evening. We were told by the receptionist that attempts to contact us had been made, but an error had occurred when taking down our phone number, and so no message reached us. Having to make the decision to ease the cat's passing had been completely unexpected, and before Muffin was given the injection, we said our goodbyes. Allowing time for the cat to slip away, Stephen and I strolled around the streets outside the clinic. We consoled each other, not with words. After all, what can be said when someone's physical presence leaves your life forever? But by the act of companionship, an appropriate gesture that mirrored the relationship Steve and Small Charge had provided for him.